6, 5, 4, 3, 2.
Hello, and welcome to Random Offense. My name is Ethan Strauss, and I cannot see anything visually right now on camera.
Maybe it's too much coffee.
Oh my God. That's what we were talking about before, Trace. We were talking about the FDA, these rules and regulations, how they're trying to take the coffee out of our hands, make us scared, make us worried, but we're not going to be chastened by them? I don't know. I'm already off topic. I'm Ethan Strauss. This is Trace Crutchfield. This is Random Offense. This is a more random opening than I was certainly prepared for, but that's okay. This is the show where we try to discuss the overlap of sports culture, politics, business, and whatever you want to talk about. I really mean whatever you want to talk about because we take audience questions from all of you out there. Trace, how do they get involved? How do they ask questions to elevate the conversation here beyond coffee?
What a timely question. If they really want to get involved and have their face on there, I mean, you'll look good compared to me. So don't worry about that.
Silver
You can go,
Foxy.
one of the easiest ways for me to say it is go to twoway.tv/Ethan. And there's a way to register and you'll get the Zoom link. Could also go to our YouTube page, which also has it pinned in the top of the chat, the Zoom link. On YouTube, you could also comment or everything. And if you don't want to get on the TV and talk with your face, it's fine. You can chat with us here. You can get involved in a lot of different ways. But the main thing right now is to register for this Zoom. And there's a lot of people in the Zoom right now. And that's how you play along. Get in here. You can really, what we're calling it, beat the press. You come in here and you try to push Ethan around a little bit about some subjects or see what he knows.
That's not true at all. I
He's also, I think he's also a good cook. You can ask him some. If you have a pointer, you want to cook a romantic dinner, Ethan's your man.
I don't agree with that. I don't subscribe to being pushed around. I only want a cult that is agreeing with me and supporting each and every one of my takes, which
That's
might
what
have
I'm here for.
Okay, well, I appreciate that. That might have something to do with why I'm going to begin with something of a mini monologue, just presenting a topic for all of you before we get in. And I should have introduced our guest, Kat Rosenfield of the Free Press, Ryan Duffy, showrunner for the Untold series, including Shooting Guards, which is out later. But I will begin with me. I will begin with me and my spiel on something that overlaps in sports and culture. Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. Perhaps you've heard of him. He's a Substacker. That's what I know him best from. He is a rival of mine. I will try to be fair. I will try to be objective, even if we are fighting for the same space with the great NBA legend Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. He, on Thursday, did the commencement speech at Harvard. And it wasn't just the typical commencement speech where he was telling people to chase their dreams and make the world a better place. He was drawing on Harvard's fight with the Trump administration, and he was saluting Harvard for being steadfast against reforms that the Trump administration wants Harvard to make. I have a quote or two here. I'll read it on the monitor to the side. That's why I'm shifting my gaze a little bit right there. When a
Behold, the sausage is being made right here.
Yes,
You're watching TV made.
This is exactly like that scene in Goodfellas where we're taking you behind the Coca Cabana, only it's me turning my head a little bit to the right like I'm Trump barely getting assassinated.
It's like a Max Headroom episode.
So when a tyrannical administration tried to bully and threaten Harvard to give up their academic freedom and destroy campus speech, Dr. Alan Garber, that's Harvard's president, rejected the illegal and immoral pressures. One of the reasons I'm so pleased to be here today is because I view Harvard University as being among the others willing to take Dr. King, I believe he means Martin Luther King, Dr. King's legacy's place. And so, Trace, this might not have much to do with sports, but I like this topic because it's a good gray area for us. This is where we thrive because we've got people who are a little bit off script. I saw similar from another NBA great who I know, Steve Kerr, who at a press conference wore a Harvard shirt and used similar language to Kareem, depicting Harvard as bullied and they're righteous, they're being bullied. And I think it's a gray zone topic. I look at it and I see that the Trump administration is making a lot of demands of Harvard, and they're saying that they need to reform their admissions process. They need to have no more DEI offices. But then there are these other things where they seem to want to curb certain kinds of protest, and they want information on students who are there from foreign countries that Homeland Security can track. I can't get into the nitty gritty of all of it. It does seem like a lot, but I think if you're of the Kareem and let's say liberal boomer perspective, you're getting one movie. You're getting one movie where Harvard is being assailed and they've done nothing wrong. And I think it's a bit confounded by, and I don't know if they mention this in these other outlets. I don't think they mention this when I look at NBC and it says Harvard 2025 commencement emphasizes diversity and truth amid legal battles with Trump. I don't know if everybody knows that Harvard discriminates against vast swaths of the population to the point where the Supreme Court ruled rather decisively that they're violating the 14th Amendment. And I don't see anybody making any kind of defense that says actually that's untrue. If it's out there, maybe somebody could confront me with it. So I look at that as just a really interesting topic, a situation where there's one movie and there's Kareem who has more of the New York Times script where Harvard's being bullied, Trump bad. And I don't know if the other side of the movie is even being depicted to somebody like Kareem or my guy Steve Kerr. And I wonder about that. And I wonder what all of you might think about that. So I just wanted to present that to the audience, Trace.
Beautiful.
Okay. Well, that's good. I'm glad I
Thank you for
presented
that.
it.
Are you ready to dig in?
Yeah.
Are you ready to get your first guess?
Oh, yeah. I should have said professional segue here. I like that topic because it kind of reminds me of this next topic. Kat Rosenfield, one of the best writers out there. She's over at the Free Press, and she just wrote a tremendous article called "A BLM Star Journalist Felled by #MeToo." And I like this topic right now. I think it's similar a little bit to the Harvard topic because this episode is kind of the residue of the 1960s and a lot of those fights. And I feel as though we had that come to a crescendo in 2020. A lot of these long-standing cultural battles just completely engulfed the culture. And I feel as though with Wesley Lowery becoming undone by these accusations, he was the star journalist who popularized moral clarity during the BLM era. His becoming undone in this way from these Me Too-esque accusations almost represents a reckoning of the reckoning. And so that's what I want to talk about with Kat. Can we get Kat on?
Kat's here.
Oh, there she is. Hi, Kat. How you doing?
Good. Thanks for having me.
Oh, we are delighted to have you. It's a great article.
Thank
And
you.
I think, okay, so there's a little bit of tidiness to this all happening. You said felled by Me Too. It's interesting that a star of BLM becomes felled by Me Too, but in this sort of delayed way, which I think that's my first question for you. Do you think that's coincidental, or do you think that represents something that we're going through? I'll present it to you right now. I feel like we're almost going through a reckoning for the reckoning. Back in 2020, we were being told we were going through this reckoning in this really formal way. The institutions would say, we're going through a reckoning. 5 years later, and it's about 5 years to the day where this stuff really popped off, it seems like we're almost informally going through the old days and saying that was crazy. This person became elevated during that time, is a disreputable person, but it's all informal during this reckoning of the reckoning, this, in this case, collision of BLM and Me Too, which almost feels like a cultural turducken. But I'm talking too much, Kat. Where do you want to take my question?
Oh, God. Well, you said turducken, and now I'm just thinking about how I'm hungry. God, there's so much here. So I think you're right that this does seem like at the same time, sort of a retread of earlier like reckoning era paradigms, but also a very significant cultural shift because you do have Wesley Lowery, who was like the anointed star of the BLM and like activism journalism that was so big during that moment, starting in 2020. And now he's basically been kind of hoisted by his own petard in the sense that this type of narrativizing in journalism is exactly the type of thing that he kind of encouraged, tried to bring about as a Oh, damn it. My microphone just
It's
quit. Can you guys?
okay. You still come in clearly, and I can
Okay.
hear the microphone changed a bit, but it sounds fine.
Okay, yeah,
Continue.
sorry. My cat knocked the cord out.
A
He's
likely
gonna appear,
story.
he's gonna appear on screen any moment, by the way. So yeah, what was I saying? Oh, right, that he ushered in this journalistic paradigm of trying to value moral clarity over objectivity, over neutrality, over that view from nowhere. And now this article, which is in the Columbia Journalism Review, is really exactly the type of narrativized kind of like narrative sleight of hand journalism that he would have probably really loved if it were being done in service of a cause that he cared about, but instead it's being done to destroy him professionally.
Yeah.
And I'm not taking any particular delight in noticing this, but I understand why some people are.
Yeah, he's a little bit like a non-violent or maybe less violent Robespierre, this idea of the revolution consuming him by the same means. It's just strange it's happening now. It seems like a theme in your article was the sense that it couldn't happen then because he was too important to this particular movement or had too much stature within this particular movement. Does it reveal anything about those movements looking back on them? Or is it just, again, specific to whatever this guy was?
I think that certainly reveals that you need to be careful when you choose your heroes, you choose your representatives.
Mm,
But I think the other thing too is that, yeah, we went through a period where if an editor had looked at these allegations and looked at the accusers, they would have probably said, no, this is not happening right now. I'm not touching this story. You have to remember, 5 years ago, you had a woman who called the police on a black man who threatened her at a public park, who was basically like run out of the country, had to change her name and go into hiding. She still is.
mm,
And that's sort of the biggest paradigm shift. It's who gets to like wield the victimhood hat, I guess.
mm. Yeah, I mean, that's sort of similar to the Harvard Trump situation where there's this allegation that Harvard is being victimized. And again, I can't get into the nitty gritty of all of that. There's this whole aspect of that where the federal government gives Harvard a lot of money as leverage, and that money gets used theoretically for science. I don't want to get into it all, but it's just interesting to me that there's this depiction of Harvard, powerful Harvard, is being victimized and bullied by Trump, and this status through victimhood that can even be applied to the world's most powerful university. That's just an intriguing thing. I like looking back on it with you, though, because it seems like I feel like we're honest about that. I know that some would chafe at that or scoff at that, but I feel as though there are other journalists who were in this fervor back then, and they made their entire lives and their output wholly consumed by stuff like BLM or Me Too before it, and they've all dropped it and for the most part not revisited it. And I'll never be able to get over that. I'll never be ever able to get over having all these peers who I did lose some respect for them and feel as though they were fake at some level, because I don't know how you can go from this is my entire obsession and what I really care about to I'm never talking about it again. That was embarrassing. LOL. And have me take you seriously in the future. Or am I being too critical?
I don't know. I mean, in the cold light of day, I guess a lot of people are, did some things that they weren't necessarily proud of during that moment of madness. I mean, it's easy to be smug about it. I wasn't a participant in that, but I've also never been part of legacy media. And I do think that the tribal incentives to say the thing that everybody else was saying, to jump on the cause that everybody else believed in, were pretty powerful. And I guess your way of putting it is probably the most appropriate. I'm not necessarily holding a big grudge against everybody who,
Mm.
beclowned themselves in that moment, except for the ones who personally went after me. They're all dead to me. But I did lose respect for a lot of people, same as you.
Yeah. I mean, there were people went after me, and I can't remember exactly who did it, because when it was happening to me, and I don't think it was happening to me to the degree it was happening to you, I just couldn't absorb that stuff. So in a way, I should hold more against people than I do, but I just couldn't psychologically handle all of that. in a way, what it gave me was something dangerous, I think, because I had this feeling back then of thinking they were all crazy and they were all caught up in a hysteria. And then to be validated and feel ultimately proven right about that, I've got to really watch myself and not get over my skis, not get too overconfident, because I feel as though I went through a process where the entire world was insane and I wasn't insane. So that's something that I have to watch for myself. Do you ever think that?
I don't know. I've thought about this a lot. Do I want to be, how smug do I deserve to be about this? And
Mm,
what I come back to always is, for me, I feel like I've always just said what seems true to me, for better or for worse. And that seems like a kind of a good North Star to have. And I feel like it's mostly kept me from be clowning myself, but also does a certain amount to keep me, like, I don't know, humble or appropriately humble. If you say you're humble, are you really humble? I don't know, but
uh,
that's what I'm going for.
yeah, I think that's even keeled. I think there's not as much honesty as I would want about how crazy things got. And it can be dismissed a bit by the pandemic conditions, but the NBA season, for instance, in my little neck of the woods, was shut down because of the incident in Kenosha that was a justified shooting where the guy had a knife and he was trying to kidnap, well, his own children, but they were in the custody of his mother. And this all came out, but it just seemed like everybody was in such a hysteria and so reactive. And there was something about the ecosystem back then that you really couldn't question these bouts of emotionality once they reached critical mass if they aligned with certain topics. And in a way, the Lowry situation, I think, is a revisitation of how crazy things got. And now a sober minded piece like yours on what's going on there, I would assume, and you could tell me different, I bet the reaction to your article was pretty reasonable and not fevered pitched like it would be in the past. Am I right about that?
It depends on where you're looking.
Ah, yes,
I,
as
I would
always.
say that the people whose opinion I value seemed to receive it as intended. The folks over on Blue Sky were not so much fans.
Really? Okay, well,
Mhm.
maybe this could be a segment in the future, the blue sky perspective, because I'm not on blue sky. What
Don't
would
go,
they
don't go.
They'll see you coming.
what what would they say over there? I can't even predict it. It's just Cat's bad or Lowry's good or
Yeah, I
what would it
mean,
be?
so I'd say modal Blue Sky user is not a particular fan of me personally or of the type of journalism that I do generally. The heterodox folks, they're no great fans of. And I think the thing about a piece like this, even though I've been very explicit that I'm not defending Lowery, I think he actually sounds like a pretty horrible person. But I do want to just like make a meta commentary on what does it mean that we are indulging in these narratives right now? What does this piece say about journalism and about how we look at women and so on? People will nevertheless accuse me of defending a rapist, because that's easier than engaging with these, I think, more nuanced and much trickier ideas.
Yeah, I was trying to remember what you said in the piece about a woman having agency until she takes a drink. That might not be the correct quote. There was a lot more to your piece. I mean, to be clear, I'm having a conversation with you that's a bit orthogonal to what you wrote in it, and I would encourage everybody to look at it and to read it. I mean, here's a question: women, are they regarded differently in the culture now than they were back then? I mean, during the Me Too. What's going on? It's a big question.
It doesn't seem like it. I don't know. I mean, I go back and forth on this because I think that the fact that this CJR piece exists and that it is framed the way it is suggests that something has really crystallized in the culture that is rooted in Me Too and is rooted in the idea that women are fundamentally lacking in agency in a way that men are not. And that worries me. At the same time, this is a post Me Too world. You have, Harvey Weinstein is being retried right now. He may be, I don't know, what they call it, acquitted, exonerated, or
Mm.
whatever. And there is a sense that, like, what was that movement for? What did it actually accomplish? And I do think I wrote about this too for the Free Press. that basically what that movement is going to be remembered for is just going completely off the rails, and becoming a witch hunt that ensnared a lot of innocent, or at least, not criminal men, and really messed up the relationship and the level of like social trust between the sexes
Mm.
in order to capture like generously maybe five actual witches, which is not great.
That's quite the summation. I tend to be verbose, so if Trace needs to hop in to tell us we're going on too long, I
No, no,
give
no.
him
You
full.
guys are doing great. It's
Okay,
fabulous.
okay.
It's
All right. Well,
fabulous.
you tell us when we need to wrap or take a question or
Yeah, well,
anything
why don't
else.
we just do kind of one more round of give and take, and then we'll move
Okay.
on to our next guest. We don't leave them to hanging too long, although this is
Okay.
fascinating.
Okay.
And the cat
Okay.
walking by was an extra bonus.
No,
Sorry about that.
that's the beauty of live.
But they
And
always tell you when something goes wrong, if like you're shooting in the field and something like makes a bunch of noise or whatever, is to put it on the camera. So the cat did us a favor by messing
yeah.
up the audio, but then appearing to take, responsibility for it.
The cat is also great. I've seen this cat before, and the cat is a steadying presence. What was I going to say? Oh, I love the line about the invisible knives. I wrote it down somewhere that you had in the article. The knives may be invisible, but they are out. Cat, that's, it's sort of, I think, my theory on how we're having the reckoning for the reckoning, but it's not formal. Why is what's happening feeling informal right now versus in the 2020 crack up, every corporation on earth seemed to be singing from the same hymn book? What's going on with this moment versus that moment?
Oh, well, I mean, for one thing, nobody has the energy to recapture that moment. I think not just now, but ever again. It's not like
Mm.
it went that well for anybody involved. Many people got out over their skis, corporations got out over their skis. Bud Light torpedoed itself in a way from which it will probably never recover. Just like in that moment, in their urgency to get on what seemed at the time like the right side of history, that at least I think has been a learning experience that is going to lead us not to see the same type of thing again, or it'll come back but in a completely different, unrecognizable, and possibly even more horrible
Yeah.
form.
Yeah. And I don't know what to make of this moment. I think that there's this sense right now that there was wokeness. Now there's the vibe shift. It's all different, but the reality is it's way more muddled than that. It's a little bit confusing. There are certain institutions that are like blue sky, and then there are other institutions that are suddenly neutral. Then there are other institutions that are more overtly on the right, and obviously Trump is the president. But I don't know where we are at. We're not in that period of time between 2013 and 2020, but we also haven't completely escaped it. And while Elon Musk taking over Twitter has changed whatever the political norms and cultural norms are out there, in some ways that's been kind of a failure, I think, at this point, versus whatever he wanted to do in the culture and accomplish politically. So I'm not being cogent. It's just a big old muddled mess. I can't give a summary to where we're at right now.
Well, speaking of messes, would you guys like to take a question from the audience?
Oh,
Oh, yeah.
yes.
I don't know if
Okay.
it's going to be a messy question or not, but we're just going to add some extra stuff to the mix. We're going to
I
go to
love it.
Jack here real quick.
Let's do it.
Hey, so the question I have for you is, I'm not sure if you saw the video of Pat McAfee roasting the New York celebrities,
Yes.
but uh, John Cougar Mellencamp called him out about it, and I was wondering, is that the most boomer lib thing to do, or is this peak boomer lib?
Well, can you help me 1 second? 1 second, because I love this. What did he call McAfee out for? And I'm
So
thinking how to.
he said it wasn't representative of quote unquote Hoosier hospitality.
Yeah. He just said he
And
wasn't polite. He wasn't, it was like a Minnesota nice thing.
yeah, and
Ah,
by the way, as someone who went to IU, went to dozens between football and basketball, dozens of IU games, um, we've given them shit before.
I'm sure.
I mean,
well, okay. I will take this question. I will think about it. I will deliberate over it. I will think about giving expository to Kat, because I don't think Kat, and I don't want to offend you. I don't know if Kat's the biggest sports follower. Pat McAfee is an interesting figure. He's part of the Play for the Bros over there at ESPN. You can't really tame him. He's really into pro wrestling. He uses that aesthetic. And whatever audience was lost by Bud Light with what Kat mentioned, that's what's trying to be recaptured via Pat McAfee by ESPN. He's located in Indiana, and before a playoff game against the Knicks, with his microphone, family setting, family situation, was using curse words and saying terrible things about figures as illustrious as Ben Stiller in attendance.
He was a punter. Wasn't he a punter?
He was a punter, big personality, now more money than God to do sports gambling and his show on YouTube. And he's an interesting kind of iconoclast bro, because even if he's not deeply political, he's just got so much juice that they can't push him around. And he had Aaron Rodgers on his show a bunch of times and was fairly defiant and angry at ESPN executives outwardly, and basically said, look, I'll leave, if you've got a problem with me. And also sometimes he'll take a political stance. He didn't interview Trump. He had that opportunity, but he did take a position during the Amon Khalif Olympic boxing controversy, saying that shouldn't happen and males should not be boxing women. And it was this little internal ESPN fight around that point. John Cougar Mellencamp, I don't think there is something a little bit that the boomers aren't digesting. And I say that with love and affection. I'm not young. I'm a millennial. I've got graying hair. But Ben Stiller responded like he was hurt. I can't remember exactly what he said in his tweet, but he almost sounded like the Derek Zoolander character with that sort of earnest hurt, like, I don't get it. We're just a bunch of fans. Why is he being mean to us? Like that sort of response. So I think there's something to the pro wrestling aesthetic that Pat McAfee embodies, and a boisterousness and a brashness to it that you never would have seen at a basketball game in the 1990s or 1980s. And I think if you're John Cougar, or perhaps more Generation X age Ben Stiller, it just looks like meanness, versus if you're a little bit younger, it looks like a show and it looks like part of the show. So that's my take on it.
That's beautiful. Well, thank you very much, Kat, for the time. You won't even have to dig into that craziness. I'll just say that.
That's good. I have nothing to say about that.
Idea,
I was trying to keep track of it. I was like, okay, pro wrestling, comedians, ESPN. I'm so lost.
Yeah. I think we can the short of it is sports is a soap opera all its own.
Yes. Soap opera.
Anyway, thank you very much for making the time and coming by. It was a great pleasure to have you on with us.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks, Kat.
All right. So now that's a perfect segue. It's Pat McAfee to Ryan Duffy, one of my old coworkers, oh, come on now.
Oh, is it dropping? Is it not a perfect segue? Has the segue become imperfect?
His button moved around. Oh, here he is, my man.
Okay. Well, I'll start giving him an intro. I'll start saying that Ryan Duffy is the showrunner.
Bring him in.
Okay. Waiting. Where is the Duffy? I'll give him the intro. Oh, there we go. North Korea. That's what we want.
1, 2, 3. So we're here just about to play a quick pickup game. Super casual with a few Harlem Globetrotters and a bunch of North Koreans and myself as Dennis Rodman and Kim Jong-un watch. I'm starting.
That's the best part.
Yeah.
I'm starting.
Yeah, there we go.
Unmute yourself, Duffy. You're ready.
Yeah. Unmute yourself, or we'll start saying that you're a close personal friend of Kim Jong-un, and there's nothing that you can really do about it in this particular setting. We can make such an accusation. I will say, as we try to get him on, that we're having Ryan on because he is the showrunner for the Untold series. Shooting Guards from that series has released recently about the infamous 2009 gun incident between Gilbert Arenas and Javaris Crittenton, a situation that was a cultural bomb when it happened and now seems slightly amusing in retrospect. And so the documentary looked at whatever the hell happened there. And I think I want to play a game of HR versus not HR as we talk about how those wizards, formerly the Bullets, should have handled that.
Yeah, this is perfect time for our little HR, not HR clip.
I believe so. Okay. Do we have Duffy on? Can we get him on?
Yeah. Duffy's
I'm on. Do you
Oh,
got me?
beautiful.
Duffy's
There we
there. He
go.
was
Oh
having
my God.
lunch.
Beautiful.
Sorry, I was just listening to Kat, enjoying the show. Ethan,
Ah,
thanks for having me on, man. Great to meet you.
oh, great to meet you as well, man. It's much appreciated. And I guess the big question for you, looking back at that incident, and for those who do not know, that is a hard one to recapitulate. That's a weird expository. Uh,
Yeah.
Gilbert Arenas, who was a superstar NBA player and a mischievous, puckish character in the league, got into a strange situation, the origins of which had to do with gambling on a team plane. But it didn't even have to do with a debt that he was involved in or the guy who was angry at him was involved in. That was Javaris Crittenton, who was just trying to hang on and make it in the NBA. It turned into a situation where Gilbert brought just incredible guns, the most beautiful, glorious guns from his collection, and was daring Crittenton to shoot him in the locker room. And Crittenton, it turned out, had brought his own loaded gun. Somehow nobody died. Somehow nobody got shot, but it did get reported. And I guess what I would ask to Mr. Duffy is this something that if it happened today would be digested totally different than in 2009, where there was a degree of seriousness in the backlash to everything going on with the Wizards' infamy?
First off, it was actually a pretty good summary of a pretty messy story. And you could have saved a lot of people. I think we took 74 minutes to tell that story, and you just did it in about 60 seconds. So it
Whew.
saved people a lot of time. The doc ultimately, as you know, goes into kind of the aftermath, right? The
Yeah,
places
yeah.
took Javaris, which are decidedly less funny. But to answer your question, 100%. I would say you're probably hard pressed to find something that happened in 2009 that wouldn't be viewed completely differently throughout the
Mm,
cultural lens of 2025. But yes, I think it's a great example. Look, it's a fascinating story in the sense that, like, there's a reading of it where it's remarkably low stakes, right? No one ultimately got hurt. It was, if you squint your eyes and kind of eliminate some of the
yeah.
details, it's kind of bravado. And you're like, well, this is professional sports locker rooms. You've been in more of them than me. There are these little capsules of machismo, and the
Yeah.
most competitive dudes on earth are put in this little, room, and it's day in, day out. You're on the same planes, you're in the same hotels. Like, in a way, it's almost crazy more stuff like this doesn't happen. You can also, if you want to argue with yourself, take the complete other side of it, which is a man brought a gun into a workplace.
Yes.
I don't care what his job is or
Yeah.
like ever. That's crazy, dude. And I think, well, I could go on about this, but the last thing I'll say is I think one of the things that I found particularly interesting from a sports standpoint, at least, and there's all sorts of other angles to this thing, is like it does ultimately redound back to this idea that the NBA, all professional sports, but the NBA in particular, is a star-driven league, right? And
Mhm.
when you look at the consequences for each of those guys, Gil ultimately is fine. I mean, they both got suspended or whatever. We can talk about that, I guess. But Gil goes on, he signs a big contract with Magic. Gil now is a beloved media figure and he's great at it, obviously. Javaris, you made the point. Javaris is just trying to hang on, hold on to a roster spot. Didn't really work out for him with the Lakers. The Wizards was his second chance. And Javaris never played another NBA game. And, the offenses weren't that dramatic. I think it was just that Gil doesn't suffer as many consequences because it's a star-driven league and those guys kind of skate by.
I think it does a good job of showing some of the complications of the social dynamics in that situation because a lot of NBA players aren't friends, or you'll be covering a team and the guys on the team aren't friends. And when I say that to people, they're often shocked by that. And they go, I think they're friends. I've had people actually try to tell me, I think they're friends just based on what they see on television. And they might have a bit of a brotherhood based on this very specific thing they do. But the problem is there's this lack of order and there's this lack of hierarchy and they're all getting paid millions of dollars, but they don't want to have to be subservient to somebody like a Gilbert Arenas, who is the max contract superstar player. And you see him abusing that power in a way. And he was a young man back then, so maybe he didn't know exactly how bad he was being about it. But you see him calling people ugly while filming them and just pushing and testing and really enjoying the expansive way that he can inflict cruelty and provoke, because he's the guy and he's top of the heap in that way. And when you have somebody who's prideful and maybe doesn't have the best judgment, it can escalate to the point at which it escalated to, or I guess I should say the point at which it nearly escalated to, which would have been quite tragic. But I think that's just it's so interesting. It's just this particular workplace where you've got these guys in their 20s making millions of dollars, and the status is just following them around all the time. You can see their salaries online as to who's making what.
Yeah, and not that I know this is your show and you do the interviewing, but if I could turn it around to you a little bit.
Do it.
It's a two-way. It's called the two-way.
Oh, it's called two-way. That's
That's
right. There we go. We're delivering on the promise.
Okay.
So one of the things I'm interested in is, look, that dynamic is kind of unchanging. The money gets higher and higher, but this dynamic of NBA locker rooms and those competitions, those rivalries, those, absent friendships, as it were, that's kind of static throughout time, right? I don't think that's changing. What has changed, I think, is the media apparatus that surrounds it. One of my favorite parts of this doc, because I'm just an old NBA fan, is the Peter Vesey.
Yep.
Yeah. So Vesey comes in, he's this great old hardened New York character. He's on the beat and he's making the calls and yelling at people. It's like that doesn't exist anymore, obviously, in all of these ways. But we do now have, places like The Athletic, right? Where reporters have great access to locker rooms. They're in there a lot, or at least seems to me. I don't know. I've never done that. I'm curious, Ethan, in your experience having done that, you said that there are guys who aren't friends. Are there unwritten rules about how much you're allowed to talk about stuff like that?
Yes. I love you're asking this question, because it's so weird and it took me a while to learn it.
Yeah.
When you're around a team and you're reporting on them, you get a sense that there are almost three circles. There are three spheres. There's the thing they're okay with everybody knowing. There's the stuff that they're okay with just you knowing. And it's just because we trust each other. And I know you're not going to report that. I'm going to tell you that. And then there's that little bullseye. And that's how do you know that? Like that bullseye right there. You saw that in your documentary when Vesey mentioned the details of Phil Jackson's contract to Phil Jackson. And that was when the alarm went off in his head, and it was, wait, how'd you get that? I've only been privy to a few of those, but there's this sense that something has broken containment. And you get a sense that there is an intricate behind the scenes sense of which information goes where. And I don't know how they agree on it. Somehow they know which stuff is fine for all, which stuff is kind of in there, and which stuff is just radioactive, nobody can know. But they do, and they've decided on it. And I think the difference between now versus then, this will come up maybe we should maybe roll into HR, no HR, because I don't think this would have been reported if it happened today. But I'm going to save that. I'm going to save my reason for that for when we do the clips.
Yeah. Sam, could you play clip number 4?
When I get to the locker room, there's guns on my seat.
You said you was gonna shoot me, so I gave you guns. He said, what I need you for? I got mine.
People are screaming, running out. Life is about choices, but I feel like I'm losing control.
That locker room situation put him on a road that he was not wanting to be on.
So to set this up a little bit, Duffy, we have a segment called HR, not HR. Where it's just like, this is something you should take to the HR, and this is something that doesn't belong in the HR, because so much crazy HR stuff happens, as you well know. Anyway, Ethan, take it away.
Yeah, in the sports world, it's this liminal zone. It's a workplace, but not really. It's like whatever job that you have, whatever tax forms you have, they have an HR department. But it's also show business, and certain people can get away with doing certain things, and certain people will look the other way when certain people do things that are I don't know, maybe we would call it illegal, flagrantly illegal. And so I like ruling on it. I like ruling, should this had been advanced through the HR process? Should this have become something formalized? And I think this 2009 incident, the Wizards found out about it, and it appears that it took, I believe, 3 days before Peter Vesey broke the news. So look, it's not presented out there like the Wizards covered anything up. I even looked that up today. I put that into Perplexity. Were the Wizards accused of covering up the incident? They are not, but they definitely knew about it. They definitely didn't do anything publicly for a few days. So I think the question would be, how should this have been handled? And do we have the HR not HR clip, or do we just
played it.
we just played it? Okay, the doc clip is what we're going with there. So yeah, that's the question. I'll give it to Duffy since he's the expert on this situation. Did they go about it the right way of basically holding on to it, or should they have just completely jumped on the situation, gotten the police involved, immediately fallen on their swords or guns, so to speak?
It's a great question, right? Because this was to keep it in the basketball parlance, it was a bit of a jump ball, right? The investigation, as it were. The Wizards investigated, DC Police Department investigated, and then the NBA themselves investigated, right? So I think there was a little bit of murkiness of like, who's leading this? You know, in the movies, when the FBI comes in, they kick out the local police department and they get out of here. This is us.
Yeah.
It wasn't a get out of here. This is us. There were a bunch of people kind of pulling strings. But to your point, Ethan, I think one of those groups, at least one, maybe two, at least one, didn't really want to pull too hard because, like, what's in it for the Wizards to get to the bottom of this, you know? So yeah, I think probably in an ideal world, and I will also say in terms of like the cover-up aspect, look, who knows obviously what exactly happened there. My sense after doing this doc was like, I think if Vesey never called, I'm not sure we'd be on this Zoom right now. Like,
Yep.
I don't know that we'd know any of this stuff, man. Like, I don't think it was coming out on its own volition, you know? So yeah, I think probably in an ideal world, this is handled in-house, you know, if a gun went off, if someone was hurt, of course, that's different. But yeah, I think you kind of try and do this with your internal HR and whatever kind of punishment gets doled out from there. But I don't know. What do you guys think?
Well, I can only imagine sending your HR intern down to talk to Gilbert Arenas.
Well,
I mean, oh my God.
Based on my understanding of the incident, when the cops showed up a few days later, the guns were on the premises. So I don't think the guns were taken home, which is rather remarkable to me. So I guess everybody was under the naive belief that nothing was going to come of it, in which case it should have been advanced to HR and the police should have been called in, because that is a theoretical ticking time bomb. If you know that there's something that nearly popped off like that and the weapons are still there. But to what I was saying earlier, I don't think it gets out nowadays. I think Vesey is from the old school. You know, we might have been slighting the boomers before. I think we should give the boomers their credit. I think the boomer reporters are more about breaking a story, and the subsequent generations are more about breaking news. And so, and I don't want to denigrate the newsbreakers in the NBA media scene. This is just a general observation. I think a lot of them, if they got this tip and they came to the team with it, the general manager, whoever, would say, hey, we'll take care of you. Can you just not report this? You know, we're going to take care of you next time a guy signs a contract, next time we break a trade, and we're going to take care of you in the breaking of the news. And by the news, I mean things that you're going to find out in a press release in a few hours anyway. And that trade would be enough, I think, for a lot of newsbreakers to just set aside this story, even though stories are just far more compelling and far more interesting. People get mad at you. They cause a lot of sturm and drang. I think it's just the newsbreaker would want to keep breaking news. Wouldn't break this.
So that's I'm really interested by that. The idea of like newsbreakers versus story breakers. In that construction, basically stories, going back to your concentric circles of NBA knowledge, stories are the things they don't want you to know. It's the details
Yeah.
of Jackson's contract. It's the fact that this happened. News, as you're seeing it, is the stuff we're eventually going to get out there anyway. It's more choreography.
Yes. Yeah.
Interesting.
It's the advanced copy of the press release, effectively, as
Right.
opposed to the dirty behind the scenes. They don't want you to know that kind of thing. And I think it's one of the things that's given Mark Halperin on two-way an advantage is that he's really interested in what's the story? What's the story here? What's going on? And it's more of a conveyor belt factory setting situation in sports media a lot of the time where it's just we're waiting to be served up what we're going to tell the public by the agent, by the general manager. And I think Vesey was perhaps, he's a controversial character. He's not a perfect guy, but I think he had the right idea of what people were interested in. And he was bold enough and disagreeable enough to give it to them, whatever the consequences.
So, how much of that move from kind of stories to news, right? There were more stories in the past, there's more news today. How much of that is a function of like within sports leagues, like player empowerment era, right? Like we don't want to get on the wrong side of these guys. They're more powerful than ever. I want to keep my access to this locker room. And how much has nothing to do with sports and is a function of a decimated news collection
Yeah.
industry, right? Like where do you kind of proportion those two factors?
I think it's both, but I think the biggest factor, or I should say the most underrated factor, in my opinion, and it's underrated for a very specific reason, which is that people don't want to admit what cowards that they are, is that the social media blowback to negativity is a lot. And I think it's one thing if you're Sam Smith and you put out the Jordan rules and the Bulls were pissed off about it. And a lot of people were pissed off at Sam Smith for what was in there. But when it reaches you via social media and negativity tends to almost bring negativity, I think people flinch. I think they don't want it. And I think the social incentives, that's what's created the difference and there's less rabble rousing. And you've got this aspect where the players might have a bigger platform than you have. That's maybe connected to the decimation of the news, but they can go on and just go after you for this unsavory thing you've reported. It just becomes easier to not. It becomes easier to tell yourself a story about why you shouldn't. And I think that's why the journalism has reached this point of utter sterility at the major institutions, that and the conflicts of interest.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think about it. I mean, you covered the Warriors, right? And it is like the quintessential. Maybe Gil and Javaris had the title belt as like biggest flare up between two teams.
Yeah.
Say it was probably taken by Draymond and Jordan Poole, right? Or by Draymond without Jordan Poole's consent.
Very similar incident. And you could tell they didn't want to escalate that to HR. It's just somebody sold the video, for those of you who are not sports fans, all-star level, Hall of Fame level player on the Warriors punched a younger up-and-coming player in the face. And the video was sold to TMZ. And we still don't know who did it. And you got every sense from the team that their expectation is that was going to stay in-house and not be escalated. But it got out. And there was a similar situation in 2016 that completely altered my dynamic with Draymond, where in the locker room in that incredible game in February against the Thunder, at halftime, Draymond was so angry at Steve Kerr for questioning his shot selection and not letting him just shoot freely, like Luke Walton had done when Luke Walton was taking over some of the games, that it nearly reached the point of physical separation or needing to be physically separated. Where, and I'm sorry if anybody is listening to this with their kids, I think he was yelling, "You can suck my dick," and just all this crazy stuff at the coach. And Lisa Salters, the sideline reporter for ESPN, relayed it because it was so loud in the locker room and relayed it on TV. And that got out in that way. And the Warriors were upset by that. And eventually a meeting between Salters and Draymond had to be brokered where they could hash out what was felt to be a breach of trust on that end. So I don't know what point I'm making other than that Draymond seems to be at the center of these things. I mean, I guess I'm just saying that much.
Well, and that it does seem so arbitrary, these kind of fuzzy rules between, to go back to your thing, I'm obviously fascinated by the kind of like forbidden knowledge versus the like orchestrated knowledge. That's such a weird, like you yelled loud enough that someone outside the locker room heard what you said, and the person happened to be a reporter who then did her job and reported it. It's hard to really kind of take issue with Lisa Salter there, but obviously I'm wrong because there had to be a whole meeting and kind of like clear the air thing about it. It's just a fascinating world, a fascinating choreography.
Oh, that's why I love it. It's that weird, again, that gray zone, that weird zone that it operates in the NBA, where these individuals matter quite a bit. And then you've got the other concentric circles of Nike and the shoe companies, and every single team is its own little Game of Thrones castle with its own little king, and they inherit it. It's, you could do a few documentaries on the NBA, I guess, is what I'm telling
We
you.
have. We got a few more coming too, don't worry.
Oh my God. Well, do you want to plug any of that before we take audience questions or go to the next thing? What do you want to plug for us?
Oh, just we're grinding away on sports docs out here. No air dates coming up, but Gil and Javaris was part of a 3-episode season that's on Netflix now. That was season 5, believe it or not, of Untold. And we're working on season 6 right now, so more to come.
Okay, man. Well, great access, great stuff. Thanks so much for stopping by.
Yeah, maybe we can take one question here real quick. But I'm just going to say that Ethan is a bit of a pet whisperer because we had the cat, and now you have Duffy's dog on the couch sitting at attention, just listening to Ethan raptly.
Oh my God.
Yeah, there is a little bit of connectivity. I was going to point that out between the cat interview and this one. There you go. That's Penny, star of the show.
Hey, Penny.
All right, we've got a question here from Tom in Chicago.
Okay.
Am I on the air?
Yes, you are, Tom.
Hi, I wanted to ask Ryan Duffy. I have 3 questions if I can push you guys time like that and patience.
Okay.
First one for Duffy. Is it not on?
No, I don't see you.
I see enough of.
Click the button again. I clicked it. I got the green light. Someone's watching this.
Your face isn't lit, but that's kind of cool. You look like you're hiding your identity.
I see what's going on. Okay, sorry. Now I can
this
see
is
myself.
a documentary. I feel like you're a whistleblower. I feel like your voice is going to be.
He is a whistleblower.
I'm turning up the light on my screen. Actually, that did work.
Okay.
Look at that.
There we go. There we go.
I thought that was a really stupid thing I was going to do. Well, I was going to ask Ryan Duffy if you ever learned how to sit Indian style, but I had a GIF of him from the Vice office being unable to sit Indian style, which I guess you're supposed to say crisscross applesauce these days. So that's pretty worthless. And then I was going to ask Ryan, when are you guys going to do a series on Minnesota Twins first baseman Kent Urbeck's perfidious removal of Atlanta Braves center fielder, I think, Ron Gant, from first base in the second game of the 1990 World Series, but that's a little in the weeds. And so I'd say, have you ever thought about revisiting not physically revisiting North Korea with Dennis Rodman, but doing the Untold version of your time in the Hermit Kingdom with the worm?
Yes,
with the worm.
Yes, because I do think, I mean, you remember this. I think there was a version of that trip and of that story that was as interesting as whatever aired was, and there's some good stuff in there. There's so much more to that trip, right? I think that episode suffered, I think, by being the season finale of the first season of Vice on HBO, where everyone was feeling the pressure of getting this thing renewed and Vice being a legitimate news gathering organization, and we were grown up and we were taking these things seriously. And you just had to turn the dial down a little bit on the absurdity of Dennis Rodman in North Korea. Anyway, the answer is yes to your very good question. I have considered that, and we are considering that.
Beautiful.
That's all I got.
Well, thank you very much,
And I
Tom.
can't sit, whatever the right way to say that, uncomfortable for the odds that I would be better at sitting that way at 43 than I was at 23 are pretty slim, I would imagine.
You never know.
You might have been working on. You're out in California, man. People learn to sit down on the ground all the time. Yeah, looking healthy.
Doing that
Thank you, Tom.
yoga.
Thanks for the call.
All right.
Well,
Thanks.
Duffy, thanks a lot for showing up, talking to us about what's going on, and asking Ethan some really interesting questions about NBA locker rooms and sports reporting as a whole.
Truly my pleasure. Congrats on the new show, guys. Really, really enjoyed it.
Thanks, Ryan.
We'll see you. Ciao. All right, and then there were two. If
Okay.
anybody else has any questions, just raise your hands and we'll put you
raise
on
your hand if you
here.
have any questions. Do we have the Beat the Press segment, Trace? Is that a segment that we have in the hopper?
We have the Beat the Press, but we don't have any questions.
Oh my gosh.
I probably shouldn't even say that. Oh,
Oh my.
now we've got one. Yes, let's see if we can play our clip. Buckle up, Beat the Press. Oh my. Well, let me see what I can do here. Everyone disappears so much for me.
We're still getting a hang of the technology here.
We are old. Okay.
I think that's the
Chris,
theme
got
of
your
the
camera on?
episode.
Hey guys.
Oh, Chris. How you doing, Chris?
Great. How's everybody doing today? Great show today, by the way.
Oh,
First time,
thank you.
long time.
Oh, thank you so much, man. I recognize the name.
First time offender.
Yeah, first time offender. Do you have a question for us?
I did. I was actually for Kat, but I didn't get in time. And I want to know you guys' thoughts on this. With the Lowery case, right? There were four, sort of anecdotes or witnesses that came forward. Is the dog that didn't bark here that none of them went to the police, or is that just me being a sort of like being a law and order type
Skeptic.
of person? Yeah, I have a feeling like because none of those, and maybe this is like a gray area that's exploited by Cosby type offenders, right? But like, is this a gray area that can be exploited by folks who want to do that, or do you think it adds to the value of or the strength of a case to not be considered, say, like regret rape, if these folks decided to go to the police, or is it because they know this person that they don't expect that person to have the capacity to do this? So I'll hang up and listen and hear your thoughts.
I mean, we could even not have you hang up and listen. I think that it's obviously a question that I cannot fully answer. What I can say is this, and this might be wrong to share. It might be, I don't know, this exists in a bit of a gray area. I knew people who knew Lowery around that time and said, this is a creepy guy. That's all I know. I don't know exactly what happened, what transpired. I tend to not be in favor of professional consequences absent the law being involved, generally. I know there are always cases that are different, and you could probably come up with some sort of scenario that would really test that impulse of mine. But especially back then, it felt as though the dynamic was whatever the rumor was or the reaction was dictated consequences. And even if it was a situation where with, say, Aziz Ansari, which was mentioned in Kat's piece, just I don't even know what that was, but everybody was reacting like it was a big deal. So then it's a big deal. I like the idea of there being consequences when something legal has actually transpired. And I actually believe, and you can say it naively, perhaps, innocent until proven guilty. And at the same time, I heard he was creepy. So that's my overall take. Is that sufficient, Chris?
Very much so. Final question. What would it take for you to ever become a fan of the NHL?
Oh my God.
Putting you on the spot.
It's hard. It's hard because I know I'm wrong, but I don't feel like I'm wrong. I feel like objectively it's not a very good sport, but I know that's just because I was raised in such a way where I wasn't exposed to it. But it's that thing where when you're thinking negatively, all you see is obstacles. And when you're thinking positively, all you see is opportunities. Every aspect of hockey I don't like. just is clarified to me, and it becomes a reinforcement of what I already believe. I don't like that the Stars play a third of the games. I don't like that it seems like it's so random as to who wins the Stanley Cup after the regular season, and there's not much of a connection. It just feels arbitrary to me. I don't like the randomness of the goals, the old West Wing quote about how they seem accidental. And but beyond that, I know I'm wrong, and I know that there are ways I could learn to love this if I truly committed to myself and braved the hour-and-a-half drive down to San Jose. So maybe that's what it requires. Maybe I gotta go to some Sharks games and see the superstar phenom who's actually the son of the Golden State Warriors medical trainer. Oddly
wow.
enough, yeah.
Well, that's an icing penalty for you, Ethan.
I
Well, that's
know.
it for the show today, guys. Thank you very much for tuning in. I would say that if you really want to support us, go to the YouTube site too. Subscribe, ring the bell so you know. Tell your friends. Come on to the Zoom too and ask questions. There's different ways of getting into all these things. And if you go to twoway.tv/Ethan, you'll be able to subscribe and you'll get some emails from us when we're coming on with the link so it's not confusing. And also look at some of the other shows that has on Two Way. We have some really great new stuff. We're really beginning to build it out with more and more shows. So, if you have a chance, it would be helpful to all of us if you looked at kind of our other content, played along with us.
Well, thank you so much to Trace. Thank you so much to all of you. Thank you for the questions.
Our guests.
And join us next week where the guest will be Kim Jong-un, and we'll be talking about the 1990
Maybe
Chicago Bulls.
We could ring up the worm and see what he's doing. Anyway, thanks a lot, guys. And remember, if you're out tonight, be exactly who you want to be.
Okay. Thanks, everybody.